In this video, we're going to go over how to decide where to build your base at in Rust. If you haven't seen my videos on card puzzles or how to pick a server properly, there's a link to a playlist in the description called Rust Tutorials and Guides. I recommend watching that first so this makes more sense. So the first thing I do after joining any server is press G and check the map. This is a random official vanilla server that wiped recently and I haven't played it yet, so I'm going to be showing you guys 4 different locations on here that I think is a good building spot, and I'll be telling you why I think that. At a first glance, the top right of this map looks really good to me. I would consider this as a spot to check out, maybe get bags around. We've got a bunch of places to get green cards like the Lighthouse Supermarket, Ferry Terminal, Underwater Labs. I'm placing my marker in the forest by this huge line of zip lines. There's also easy access to the snow right next to us where we'll be able to get a bunch of nodes, and there's also 2 caves if we're ever super struggling for nodes. So we could even build a base deeper in the snow next to a zipline where we can store loot to transfer during the night via the ziplines back to our base. We've got access to a ton of recyclers nearby, the fishing village to get a boat or scuba gear or do the missions, and then we've also got oil rig and underwater labs. There's just a bunch of stuff over in this area. We've got 3 different forms of transportation options: the road to find cars, we've got the zip line, and then we've got the fishing village for boats. Something to look out for in this area are these ice lakes. This is places that bigger groups like to build at because it's flat. Another thing to keep in mind is people like to build in these lakes right here because you can build really big bases, and the only people that really do that are very good at the game. So that's also something you want to keep in mind. And then we have this weird option because of where the outpost spawned at, to where if we build next to a fishing village and get a boat base down, we can drive around the map and have pretty quick and easy access to the outpost. And if you buy a submarine and drive it over there, it's like one of the safest options of recycling a ton of components without buying a minicopter. The bad thing about that area though is it's probably super competitive, and there's probably a ton of people built over there because of the oil rigs, underwater labs, and all the places to get cards at. So unless you're the first one there after it respawns, most of the monuments are probably going to be ran by other players. Moving on to the second build location, I'm looking at the top left side of the map, and it's looking pretty crazy because launch site, missile silo, and HQM quarry. But there's a cave with a river on an island over here that's looking like a really good spot to build at. It is going to be very difficult to get over here though because the spawns are on the other side of the map, so you're going to have to run all the way over here. There are zip lines along this edge, along the coast right here, which is pretty good. We've got the airfield over here with the supermarket and missile silo. Missile silo is going to be pretty crazy to take, especially with launch site right next to it. There's going to be a lot of groups over here. But we do have access to the underground tunnels in the airfield if we do really need that. This is a good option to have nearby. And there's also one at the HQM quarry, but that's definitely going to be taken over by somebody. And missile silo and launch site is pretty much going to be taken over. We can see with the shops as well that there's going to be a bunch of groups over here fighting, so it could be a good place to go grub and try to get some guns at, but for scrap it's not going to be that great. There are a shitload of roads over here though, and there are train tracks very close by where the trains are going to spawn at if we do need that to get around the map. As for nodes, we do have the snow nearby with a ton of cliffs. Launch site has a mountain next to it that's going to have a bunch of nodes, but it might be difficult or contested. A lot of people might be building over here because of launch site, but this top peninsula is probably going to be a good spot to farm, as well as our cave. Our cave is going to respawn nodes inside of it, and our island is big enough to where we might have nodes spawning on it. And this forest over here has a mountain next to the supermarket, which is also a great area to farm at. So this is a pretty chill area overall, besides, you know, having missile silo and HQM quarry right next to it. We could get a boat and farm down the side of the map if we get real desperate. There's a fishing village right here to get a boat at, and that's a good way that we could farm some scrap at and run it to outposts to recycle and then drive back to our base. And like I said earlier, that's a very safe way of doing it most of the time. Overall, that's a pretty chill area to be at. You're not going to be running a whole lot of monuments. Since you're on an island, you're not really going to be fighting that much. It's just going to be farming your cave, running the water with a boat to get scrap. And it's also in a pretty low-key area because it's away from the oil rigs, so nobody might not even know that you're over there, and you could stockpile a bunch of sulfur for later into the wipe in that cave. Moving on to the third spot that I think would be really good to build at. It's probably over in the bottom right over here next to water treatment. Depending on how late it is into the wipe, this is going to be one of the most crazy areas because people spawn over here. So to avoid getting stomped out, you want to pick something that's a little abnormal, a place that people wouldn't normally think to build at, but it also still has to work. So I would say like up near this fishing village, there's a road, there's a fishing village for boats, the mission that you can do there. And then we've got a mini monument with zip lines over here as well. There is a forest closer to water. If it's buildable, that's probably the best option because then you can kind of tuck yourself away. If you're over here, you're kind of exposed and left out in the open, but it's probably going to be your safest bet if you can't build in the forest. The biggest reason that I'm considering this area is because I can easily access scuba gear, and there is an underwater labs directly above here, as well as water treatment, which doesn't require any clothes to run, so you can do this with 0 rad protection. We've got places to get green cards that surround us, as well as a train yard, which creates this really weird path to the barn, and we can just take this train around in a loop to get over there to get horses for another mode of transportation, and then follow the train tracks back on the horse. So that's a little weird thing that's going on here because of train yard. I'm pretty much just going to be running underwater labs and water treatment back to back to back as much as I possibly can. And I'm not running them in hopes of doing the card puzzle. I'm doing it in hopes of fighting people. And also if the server pop is very high, the underwater lab is going to respawn a lot. We've got the harbor next to us, so we can also keep an eye on the cargo and take the train tracks down to the harbor so that we can try to counter that. If we do end up getting a gun and researching it before tech treeing to anything, there's the military base next to us where we can kill scientists for meds and ammo, so we can just learn that and stack up on ammo and meds without having to craft it. This is going to be a pretty bad area for farming nodes. The only real place is around the junkyard. There's a little mountain where you could farm some nodes, but due to this being a place where fresh spawns are at, it's probably not going to have a whole ton of nodes over there. So we're going to pretty heavily rely on PvPing and running monuments later into the wipe. Since Fishing Village is right next to an underwater labs and water treatment, which is my favorite monument to run as a solo, I would probably choose this spot first over anything else. Mainly because if I'm struggling, I'll at least be able to get a jackhammer and a pump shotgun from doing the missions, as well as being able to fish for blue cards and low grade. So this is my top contender, but I do have one more place that I would consider building at. And that is over in the direct center of the map. The way that the map spawns, there's usually either a mountain or something in the center of the map that causes the roads to form like a circle. So you can see we've got the circle of roads and then a circle of the train tracks, and then the monuments kind of spin out from there. So most of the time, PvP chads like to build over here because it'll have easy access to everything on the map, and then you'll get mini copters to fly to things that are farther away. So this is where I would build at if I feel like I'm going to roll the server. I might push my way towards one side or the other. And what I mean by that is I'm going to build very small bases, like 1x1s. I might even just have like a bag and see how far I can snowball with a bag to kind of judge where I want to push myself towards, if I want to go to military launch, train yard, or dome in this case. And I'm going to want to choose which one to push towards based off of how hard the PvP is there, basically. If I'm going to push towards like the military tunnel for this case, it's got a mining outpost next to it as well where I could try to grub. It's very close to the border between the biomes, so I could build in this forest so I'm not freezing all of the time. We are in a pretty vulnerable position over here though. There's a lot of foot traffic between these two monuments, and we're also next to a road, so people are definitely going to see our base, and if we've been winning our fights and people figure out where we live, they're probably going to offline us. So this is like the final place that I would build at. I'd probably only play here for a day or two unless I like really go hard and I get a giant compound built with turrets on the first day or two. So I don't know if I would consider building my main base here. I would definitely try one of the other 3 areas first. So let's say I'm built over down by water treatment and I've just completely controlled this area. There's not a whole lot of action going on and I'm looking to fight more. Then I can use these train tracks nearby that I purposefully built next to so that I can build a PvP base, a flank base, or whatever you want to call it, in the center of the map. And this is also something that I took into consideration on the other 2 build spots when deciding if it was good or bad to build over there. But if the center of the map is dead and there's no PvP over there, and we're built on the coast like this, and we've got a cave where we could store a bunch of loot very safely, we could, you know, build a base closer to the oil rigs and drive a boat around the map over to there, and then scuba dive over to the oil rig. You could also leave the boats on this side of the map, like you build a boat base over here and you use the boats to get to the oil rig, and then you can use the train tracks to transfer loot back to your main base during the nighttime. But as you can see up here, if we were controlling this area, we don't have to build a flank base across the map. As long as there's action going on in this area, we could build a secondary PvP base and then store our loot in our main base. And we just fight out of our PvP base and transfer loot during the nighttime so that people don't know what our main base is. That's the whole point of doing that. And as a final thought, you probably noticed I didn't choose anywhere in the bottom left side of the map to build. And the reason is because there's a sulfur quarry, giant excavator, outpost, and harbor where the new cargo is going to dock at, so there's going to be a lot of bigger groups over here, as you can tell by this crazy shop thing going on at this one. And these groups are going to control this area. They're going to raid absolutely everybody because they're going to get a shitload of sulfur from sulfur and excav. And they can also buy GP from outpost and get rockets and C4 from doing cargo. I mean, we could attempt to build over here. There's a satellite and a river with a fishing village. It's just not going to be a whole lot of fun unless your goal is to Alone in Tokyo that shit and get raided. So these are the 4 spots on the map that I would consider the best places to build at as a solo player. That's all I got for you guys today. Make sure you check out the Rust tutorials and guides playlist linked in the description or on screen right now. Leave a like if you liked the video, leave a dislike if you didn't, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.